Hey there, everyone. Welcome. Thank you very much for joining us today. Going to be having a look at one of the cooler areas in Auralia and Musician today. That is looking at the library area and having a bit of an explore of the custom question creation side of things, which I think is kind of one of the more exciting parts of the program, especially if you're looking to really customize your content to meet really specific kind of curriculum needs, and then deliver that to your students. Let me just do a quick screen share here. Okay, so just as we get going, as always, a little bit of housekeeping. Can I just have a quick thumbs up just to make sure you can all hear me there? That'd be fantastic. Wouldn't be the first time I'd spoken for 5 minutes without realizing no one could hear me. All right. Great, thank you very much. All right, as per usual, if you've joined us for any of our other webinars, basically I will be powering through with the presentation today, and one of my colleagues will be manning the Q&A. So if any questions pop up as we're going through, please just pop them in there, and we'll get back to you either during the webinar or follow up afterwards. I will be keeping an eye on the chat a little bit, but less so. So the Q&A area is definitely the best place to go to for any queries that pop up during the session. I will run a quick poll just so I can best understand your main areas of interest today. The library is kind of quite a vast beast, so hopefully just get a chance to be able to focus on the things that are of most interest to you. So hopefully that poll has popped up there for you. All right, great. It's a bit of a broad mix. And finally, just down here, so the webinar recording will be made available afterwards as well. So you'll be able to review that if need be, share it with colleagues. We'll be making that available on our YouTube channel and also in our closed Facebook group, which you are welcome to join if you are not already a member. I'll pop some info in the chat window with some of those resources, towards the end of the session. All right, let me just close that poll. Thank you for that info. So as I said, the library is quite a vast beast, and we're covering a few different areas today. If this is kind of your first time joining us for a webinar and you haven't used the programs that much before, you may want to step back and have a little bit of a look at some of the more kind of 101 webinars that we've recorded. That's not to say that today won't be of interest and relevance, but yes, I guess the content of today will be more on the intermediate and advanced side of things in relation to customizing the programs to best suit your kind of curriculum needs. So yeah, we'll be exploring kind of most of these kind of key areas, from basic navigation and exploration of the library through to actually creating your own questions, and looking at, if we get time, potentially how to integrate those into a test or a worksheet. And also, hopefully we'll get time to give you a sneak peek at a few new library features that are coming out within kind of the next week or so. All right, we'll jump into the library, but just so you're aware, the library supports a whole range of different media types, from real audio recordings, notation, images, and from that you can create a whole range of different question types, as well as harness or make use of the content that we provide in there for you already. I'm going to start off by mainly looking at how to kind of look at the existing content, how to locate that and tag it so you can easily find it at a later stage and then use it in your own tests or worksheets, and how you can kind of manage that content initially before we jump into creating your own and importing your own. All right, let me jump into Auralia here for you now. Okay, hopefully everyone's got that screen share. So this is the library area. I'm going to start off looking at this content in Auralia. I will mention that library content is shared across both Auralia and Musition. So if you have import content into one program, it's also available in the other. For the content that we provide, there will be different sets of questions in Auralia versus Musition that are driven by separate ear training versus theory content. But I did want to point out that the media itself is shared across both programs. So you could use some notation in Auralia for a harmonic dictation question, and you could use that exact same piece of notation in Musition for a supporting harmonic analysis question. So really quite useful to be able to harness those materials across both programs to create aligned theory and ear training content for your students. Okay, so quick overview here. In the library here, we have all our media listed down this side of the program, and it is all organized by composer. You will see here that the little icons here indicate the type of media that we're looking at. So obviously a little audio file. If need be, I can click on the play button here. Play that back. And actually, just let me check I have my Zoom audio settings on. Beautiful. Okay, so I have audio recordings here. I have notation files that are indicated by the 16th notes there. Like so. And in here I also have things like images, so image files. And again, I can preview that up here, clicking on the eye icon on the toolbar. So a whole range of content across those three media types. The next column here provides a little bit of information about the name of the work, obviously, and some details here, the length, key, and so on. There is a description here. When you mouse over, you can see here, you get a little bit more info there. And then the far right column indicates the number of questions that are attached to that piece of media. So here you can see we have 23 questions attached to this as what we consider to be a master file, and then several excerpts underneath that break down the questions into various kind of subgroups there that are specific to those excerpts. Okay, a couple of other little items that are worth knowing about up here on the toolbar. The filter. So if you do need to look at just audio content or just images, so on like that, you can turn these items on and off to hide any content that may not be relevant for you whilst you're exploring the library area. Okay. All right, so moving on, you'll also notice that over here on the right, this is where all the questions that are connected to this bit of media, that's where they live. So we can see here that this particular excerpt has a whole bunch of different questions attached to it, relating to everything from kind of dynamics to meter recognition, to tempo, and a whole range of things down here. As the instructor, we can select and preview any of these questions, again just using this little preview button here that appears throughout the programs across various kind of areas if you ever need to preview or check something out before you release it to your students. Now I will add that this library interface that we're looking at the moment, this is not how students interact with this content. Basically, this area is just for you to view, manage, and create content, and then you will actually deliver it via a worksheet or a syllabus within the programs. And we have other training videos that cover those things in more detail, but I might touch on them briefly later if we get a chance. Okay, so as I said, the library is quite a vast beast. So this search bar up here is certainly going to become your friend if you choose to explore this content in detail. I'm going to start off with just a very basic search that looks for content by a certain composer. So we're going to start by just searching for Mozart here. And you can see there's lots and lots of different content here, again grouped by work. So if we were to perhaps select Eine kleine Nachtmusik, movement 1, we can see here over on the right that there are many questions attached to this particular work. So let's just preview a few of these just so we can get an idea. So a simple multiple choice question, and I will also mention that over here in the questions area, the question type is also indicated by this little icon here, this one referring to a multiple choice based question, whereas this one referring to a notation entry type question. So those little icons may help guide you to particular question types if the description or title on the question doesn't. All right, so let's just start off with perhaps a tonality question. Again, just look at the preview. All right, so come in and select my answer there. As we develop some of these questions later, you'll note that you can also show notation on your feedback screens as well to support what's been learned. All right, so that's an example of a very basic multiple choice question. And then we can move on to things like, say, texture. And so on. Through to, let's jump into one of the, say, melodic dictation type questions. So the student can pop in their answer. Hopefully do substantially better than what I'm about to do. And they get some nice feedback, displaying the correct answer against their answer, where things went astray. And of course they can play back the audio there. And so on like that. So there's lots and lots of questions in here, so we won't jump through all of these now. But I do want to make you aware of the kind of the breadth of the questions and content that are already in the library. So even if you choose to not go past this point, you can kind of customizing your own questions and content. There are thousands and thousands of questions in here that you can harness to integrate into your courses. Okay. All right, so I've had an interesting question there just in regard to students having issues distinguishing between rests and long notes. I will jump in, I'll demonstrate how you can manage some of that, some of those sorts of things a little bit later in the question when we create a little bit later in the webinar rather, when we create our own custom question. Okay, so as far as other content, let's start to get a little bit more specific now with our searching. So let's say we want some melodic dictation. All right, so all sorts of goodies pop up here. We're going to have a look at something by Elgar here. And we're going to have a look at this little question here. So again, this time I chose to search by a particular question type, melodic dictation plus a composer, but I can also search via many other kind of specific items that I might be looking for. If I remove Auralia here, and I search for something 4/4, and whoops, search for 4/4, and perhaps I want something in D major, I can search and filter by all these sorts of various search terms here to find exactly what I'm after. So certainly having a play around with the search terms that are available there will just help you to navigate this area and explore the content as to get a really kind of fine-tuned grasp of what's going on there. Okay, let's jump back to our other example here. And again, I'll just select this top question and hit play. And so on. As I always mention, if those feedback sounds start to drive you or your students crazy, you can turn them off. Okay, and something like that, again, I can play back my answer, the correct answer, and also the real audio recording there. Now you can also search in here for more specific things. Let's say we want something that has a little bit of chromaticism. You can also use those various search terms to locate more specific content. And there's an example down here that we might grab. Melody 170. So this is an example of, whilst we also have lots of content in here that draws from real repertoire, draws from the literature, we also have some more kind of generic content that we've recorded and created that it can be really useful for dealing with really specific kind of curriculum requirements that you can't always find when you're scouring the literature to find these types of examples. So in here, for example, it's quite a basic melody that just incorporates a little bit of chromaticism. Good entry point for your students for exploring these concepts. And so on. I'll get a few things right here, so my stats look okay next time I do a demo of the reports area in Auralia Musition. Okay, so you can see I was given partial credit there for my efforts. And there's the melody. Here's what I entered, and again I can play that back. So the key point here being that you can search for some quite specific things in the library to find really kind of, as I said, specific items that deal with curriculum content that may be relevant for what your students are studying at a certain point in time. So these search terms are all driven by tags that we have attached to the media and content. Now, if you happen to find a question that you really like while you're browsing through the library here, it can be quite useful to, I'm just going to double click on that question to open it up, to add your own custom tags so that you can then locate this question later if you need to add it to your own test or worksheet. So under the custom tags field here, I'm just going to pop a use 101 tag so that I can locate that easier, more easily. Okay, so that can be, yes, quite a useful thing. As I said, the library is a huge beast, so being able to essentially tag things like that so you can then assign them to a particular course, a year level, or so on is quite a useful tool to have later. So if I search for use 101 up here now, there is the question that we just found and just tagged. So later when I'm adding these to my tests or worksheets or syllabi, I can, of course, then use that search term again to locate that content. So as well as more kind of advanced repertoire-based content in the software, you can also search for really many kind of simpler type drills as well. So in here, for example, we have a whole bunch of 3-note, 4-note and 7-note dictation melodies that just use whole notes. And you can see they start off with really simple scale degree combinations, 1 2 3, 1 1 2. So for beginner students, this can be a super friendly introduction to melodic dictation. And you can see down here, just various other combinations. Excuse me. Let's just choose one of these. And you can see here we also have questions here that are delivered over different clefs. So that top one is for alto clef, bass clef, tenor clef, and treble clef here. So using the clef is something else that you could choose to include in your search terms here for many of the questions. Let's just preview this quickly. Let's just play it once again. Okay. And so on like that. So again, yes, the library across Auralia Musition, whilst including more intermediate and advanced content for your students, also includes a whole bunch of really building block type materials in there as well that you can use. So if you did need to deliver kind of fixed library questions that were for things like interval recognition, you can also find those types of questions in here, sometimes relating to repertoire. So in this case, the student is having to identify a minor second as it occurs in for release, through to kind of more generic type questions where the student is just having to identify a major second there played quite in a more kind of traditional way, out more detached from repertoire or literature. Some other quick search terms that may be of interest. If you need to search for jazz, contemporary, or different types of content, you can certainly find a bunch of that type of content in here as well. So I'm just going to search for pop here now, and we've got a range of different question types here. Let's perhaps just choose, what's a good one? Jump down to here, pop guitars, and over here we have a harmonic dictation question here that we can preview. And so on. Okay, on the harmonic dictation side of things, let's also just do another quick search in here. Harmonic dictation, and again, we can search for more specific kind of harmonic vocabulary in here as well. So we want questions that include applied chords, secondary dominants. We can come in here and isolate that type of content. And you can see we have many progressions in here that use that content, and as well as in within longer excerpts, you can also find really basic content that really isolates a concept, so that students can approach it without too many distractions of other harmonic vocabulary. Let's just have a quick look at this. let's just pop in. Okay. So lots of content in there that you can harness, search for. If you need more advanced content that relates to augmented sixth chords, then you can certainly search for that more specifically as well. Okay, now just before we jump into Musician and have a really quick look there, I will just show you one other example here that again draws from repertoire. Again, an example using applied chords here. And we'll just preview this. So I just happen to know that there's this particular composer that I like to use for my curriculum content, and search for harmonic dictation there. All right, so in this case, we're given the rhythm of the melody just as a reference point as we work through the question, and as per the previous question, we can then enter our answer here. There are other question types. Let me see if I can find one. All right, here's a good example where the chord palette is limited, is restricted, and if we get a chance, we'll have a look at how you can control your questions using chord palette restrictions as well. Again, just so students aren't overwhelmed with having like a full chromatic chord palette there that they have to navigate to actually submit their answer, when perhaps this is the core content that is required as part of their current level of study. All right, let's one last question type in here, and again we'll get to creating our own shortly. But you can find a bunch of extended response type questions in here where the student can essentially submit a extended text response type question, text answer rather. So in here again, I can choose from various works. Let's just choose one here. So we can choose to pause here for the moment. But basically this question type allows us to play back some audio, ask the student some questions. If we wanted to here, we could also display some notation or part of a score, and then the student can simply submit their answer for assessment for grading by you as the instructor at a later date. So, yeah. Okay, and that one will be submitted for grading at a later stage. Okay, so I want to make sure we get time to move on to creating some of our own content. Just quickly jump into Musician here, just so you can see some of the different types of things you might find in here. And again, first, I'm just going to, again, some new content that we'll be releasing within the next week. Again, we have a whole bunch of new content that has a diversity tag. So lots of content that's driven by works by women composers and composers of colour in here. You can search for diversity and find all sorts of questions and content in here that you can immediately add to your courses. So we can search for things like form, perhaps. And let's jump in here. So score is displayed here, and for this particular question type, we have to define the form type. Select recommended binary, and then once again get some nice feedback here with the form mapped out for us. Okay, so that content will be available very, very soon. Okay, while we're in Musician, let me have a quick think again. As I mentioned, so anything that we used for harmonic dictation in Auralia, we can use for harmonic analysis in Musician. So again, lots of repertoire-based content, but again, if you have specific kind of harmonic content you're looking at delivering to your students, you can come and find that in here. And let's maybe just start with 115, and you can see here we have, for most questions, for most media items, we have content that delivers these questions over both using Roman numerals as well as using jazz contemporary chord symbols as well. So just to preview one of these quickly, and again, the chord palette is not limited on this particular question, but you can also imply those limitations when you add this content to a test worksheet or to your own syllabus. So I'll come in here, do my harmonic analysis. Correct. And so on. And in Musician, of course, and we can play that back. Okay, the other thing that you can deliver in Musician is a bunch of part writing focused content. Now again, in our next kind of content release, which should be within the next week, we're going to be including some new kind of test content that basically has all this content nicely kind of grouped and arranged for you already. But just so you're aware, there is lots of this in here in the library that you can kind of piece together in different ways if you choose to. So for example, in here we can choose a particular item here, and if we want, we can do a 4-part writing question. In this case, this is just going to be a 2-chord example, so we're essentially just having to voice lead from a 5/7 chord to a tonic chord here. But there are also lots of other questions that help students to understand key part writing skills by breaking these concepts up into really small building blocks. So everything from understanding SATB voice ranges for each voice type to, you can see here we have some more species related questions. And I'll jump down the bottom here through to some error recognition type questions. Here. All the following part writing errors are found in measure 1 of the example except, and then the student has to identify the part writing error that's not occurring in the first bar there. Through to, again, all these core skills broken down into really specific questions, dealing with cross relations, doubling errors, hidden fifths, octaves, and many other things. Again, there are incorrect spacing. There are a bunch of questions here that have the student doing error ID, basically. So in this particular excerpt, the student has to move from chord to chord through this excerpt, identifying which error occurs, or if perhaps no error occurs between each of these. And just so you can see what this looks like. So the student gets some nice feedback like this, and of course they can play it all back. Okay, and as I mentioned, I won't delve into this for long, but just to show you, I think I have it set up here for you. A lot of this content is already organized for you, either within our kind of new tests and worksheets 4-part writing group in here. You'll also be able to find it within some of the various theory and oral 1 and 2 kind of groups and syllabi that we have set up and coming again in the new excuse me, in the new content release. Okay, so let me just jump back over to here. So I think that just kind of hopefully gives you a broad overview of the existing content in the library as a starting point, because it is, yeah, as I said, super vast, and rather than trying to, you know, always feel as though you have to rebuild content from scratch for yourself, harnessing that content or copying and editing it gives you a lot of control. Okay, so we're going to look at creating our own custom questions now, importing our own notation and audio. As I said, if you have existing content you may have created in Sibelius, Finale, etc., you can import that content into the program as music XML or XML. We don't support everything that those programs do because we are not a notation program, but it can be a good way to get existing content into Auralia or Musician. Your other option for notation is to create it in our built-in notation editor, which is quite simple to use, and you can save it directly to the library from there. So we'll hopefully get to that in a moment. And then these are some of the question types that we'll have a look at. Various dictation types, multiple choice, and some other kind of highlight and text options here. Let's jump back into Auralia for some of this. Okay, so the first thing that I'd just like to mention is before you go importing and creating your own content, say if we go back to our Mozart example, the first thing to be aware of is that, say if we go to one of these questions here, opening phrase, and we want to have a look at the melodic dictation question here. So the first thing, if we kind of like this question, but would perhaps like to make a few modifications to it, and again, this can be a great starting point for creating your own content to replicate an existing question and then edit it. The copy function up here is certainly your friend. So I'm just going to copy this question. It's made an exact copy. I'm just going to double click on it to open it. So without doing anything to this question at all, something that I can do to perhaps change the level of difficulty for this question, or again, if there was any ambiguity in the length of, say, rhythmic durations in the work, I can come in here and I can choose Modify Selections. So that was that button there under the question area. And what I can do here is the green highlighted notation is the notation that the student will have to interact with, that they will have to enter. But perhaps I deem that this whole bar was a little bit difficult for my students, but this bar was fine. I can turn on all the notation in that bar and disable other bits. So it just gives you a lot more fine-grained control over what the student has to interact with, the level of difficulty of the question. So now, when I close out of here, and again, the little preview button up here can let you see what this question will look like. So this time, I can only interact with the areas of the notation that I have selected back in that question set up there. So that just gives me a lot more flexibility in how I can manipulate existing questions. Again, if I deem that those rests were a bit hard to hear, as I did with these ones, I can certainly turn them back on. Okay, so that's the first thing as far as manipulating existing content. Again, something else that's super useful in the library, whether you're working with existing content or your own custom content, is the ability to create excerpts or extracts from an existing work. So again, in here, this work is 5 minutes 53 in length, but if I want, I can either click on plus here to create a new extract, or I can kind of right click on that on there, click on new extract, new excerpt, and I'm presented with this dialog here. So what this allows me to do is to non-destructively go, great, I actually want to use this little bit of audio here as the basis for one of my questions. And I have no idea what this will be, but okay, so I can use that for any number of things. I can give that particular extract a name. I again can tag it so that I can find it later when I'm creating my own questions if need be. But yes, the key point here again is that you can non-destructively slice and dice audio recordings and also notation once you have them in the library area. Just makes it super flexible in the way that you can create and assign content. Okay, and of course, you also have the option with any notation files, you can also copy them, edit them to suit your needs if you want to, say, simplify the notation or provide a perhaps an alternate version that introduces a different musical element. You can certainly do that as well. So again, you can just copy, and then you'll be able to right-click on that to edit that piece of notation there. All right, let's jump into some of the actual question creation goodies here. So, as we mentioned before, importing your own content. So I'm going to import files here. We support all the common kinds of audio, audio image formats, as well as music XML. And let me just jump in here. So I have a short MP3 here of some Beethoven that I'm going to import straight into my library to use as the basis of a series of questions. So we're going to start off by creating a dictation question. So as I mentioned here, we have our now this work actually already exists in the library, but I just wanted to illustrate how you can manipulate this content once you import it in. And in here you can see I've also got my XML, my music notation file. That looks a little bit like this. So I've got 3 parts. I've got Roman numerals and also jazz chord symbols there. Okay, so what we're going to do is coming over to the question area here, I'm going to click on plus to create my own question. I'll give it a name. Dictation, and we're going to start off by transcribe the French horn 1. And again, I can include tags here so that I can find this later quite easily. Now we are going to create a notation-based question here by selecting this radio button up the top. And under the question area here, we select notate, which is ideal for this particular question format. And then we simply have to select the notation that we're going to use. And again, I'll select my Beethoven that's popped up there. All right, so this part of the software is super flexible in how you can assign and manipulate the notation here for your question. So basically, in here we can choose exactly what's hidden, what is shown, what is available for editing, and what is kind of locked. So for this question, I'm going to hide the jazz chord symbols. My French horn 1 part is visible, and I'm also going to click on the pencil here to make it editable. I'm going to select on my notation to determine which parts of the notation are shown and hidden. And again, I'm just going to select that first note to make that first note provided when that student completes the question. And for these other 2 parts, I'm going to leave them on as a reference for the student, but you'll note that the pencil, the edit icon is disabled. So my students won't be able to interact. They'll be able to view these 2 parts, but they won't be able to actually interact with them or edit them. And I'm going to leave my Roman numerals on as well. A few other options up here. If you want, you can choose to replace the notation that's selected here with rests or with blanks. And the display option doesn't really apply to this question type, but we'll get to that in a bit if we can Okay, so replace with blanks. Now I want my student to only be able to enter single notes, just so that I get excited and start entering chords in this part. And I think all the other defaults there look pretty good. So I can close out of this window now. Now for my playback, you'll note here that the notation file that we just selected has automatically been copied down to here for our playback. So I can use that notation for playback in my question, but as we know, I imported some audio here, so why use the notation when you can use a nice audio recording? So I'm going to select audio there and select here, and now I can choose my MP3. I can play that back there. And so on. All right, if need be, I can also set a starting pitch and counting just via this dialog here. And I'm just going to select a chord, major chord, and E flat major. I won't worry about accounting for now. And finally down here, once again, the piece of notation that my student's answer will be assessed against has been automatically copied down to this assessment area. If I need to preview that, again, I can just click on Modify Selections. And I can see here that this little tick here means that this is the part that my student's answer will be assessed against. These other parts will be visible, but the tick box is off, so my students won't be assessed against those. All right, so that is our question set up. Let's have a quick preview of that to see what it looks like. Okay, so the student can enter their answer. And again, let's see where things went astray, compare their answer with the correct answer. Okay, so that's a simple custom melodic dictation question. I just wanted to quickly just show you just the power of the modify selections area. So again, if I just wanted to simplify this for my students, I can choose to just turn off the other parts as far as what it would look like for the student on screen. So it just ends up looking like so. And the beauty of this area of the program as well is that using modify selections, again, if we all of a sudden decided we actually wanted to turn this into a two-part dictation question, I can simply turn on any of the other parts and decide which bits I want to be editable and given to the student. So we, of course, would update our question text here to say transcribe the French horn, both French horn parts. But now the question looks like this. The correct answer. All right, and going one step further, we can quickly turn this into perhaps a rhythm dictation question. So we're just going to use the little percussion clef here, click on that, and it converts the notation straight to a single line percussion staff here. And now the question, obviously we would update our question instruction text here. Now the question looks like this. And then we can compare our answer against the correct answer again. So the key takeaway here is once you get some content into the library, you can manipulate it in lots and lots of ways really easily to create many different question types. And it's actually really quite quick and easy. Using this excerpt, again, let's this time I'm going to stay as a notation-based question, but I'm going to change this into a harmonic dictation question now. So under the question area here, I'm going to choose chord symbols, and I want my chord symbols to include just Roman numerals and figures. And again here, we're going to limit the chord palette, which is that feature I mentioned earlier. So we can create a custom palette here if we want, or we can choose to just include the chords that are required to get the answer correct, essentially. Okay, so in here, again, we can still choose which elements of the notation are displayed for the student in this question. So I'm going to turn off my jazz chord symbols. Now, in this case, I could perhaps provide the melody line as a reference for students if I felt as though that was giving away too much information, like perhaps the A flat here giving away the fact that this is actually a 5-7 chord here. I could perhaps choose to just show the rhythm of the main melody, just as a kind of point of reference for your students as they're completing the question. Okay, again, my notation is still set as the audio. And let's have a quick look at what this question looks like. Let's just pop my answers in there. And again, we can see where things went astray. And play back the audio and view the melody as well. So really easy to manipulate that content in a few different ways to deliver, really specific question types that are all tied and based around, set repertoire. All right, so they're kind of your core kind of melodic, rhythmic, and harmonic dictation questions, all based around that repertoire. What we're going to do now is I'll click on plus again to create a new question type. And this time we're going to create a multiple choice meter recognition question. Again, I'll tag that here, Muse 101. And this time, up the top here, we're going to select multiple choice. And down here, we can then edit our choices. So here, we can choose to have a text multiple choice question, notation, images, and also audio and MIDI. I'll explain some differences in a minute. But for the basic kind of question set up here, we want a meter recognition question. And it might be, we could enter specific meters here, or we could ask the student to identify perhaps at a basic level if it's simple. And again, let's click on plus again, or is it compound? And then I enable or select my correct answer here by setting this little checkbox. If I want to provide more useful information to the student in the feedback, I can select some audio or notation to be shown to the student during the feedback, and some notation here as well if need be. Some options here, whether you want things kind of positioned in a random way and just basic kind of layout, things that you can have a play with once you explore this content. Okay, so I'll probably put what I need to type is this. And down here, again, I can choose my audio for playback. And let's go for, let's just choose our Beethoven Emperor again for this. So in this case, we have a simple multiple choice question. Multiple choice text. We can submit our answer like so. And as I said, if we wanted to, we could then display some nice notation there for the student on the feedback to support their learning. Now, the other multiple choice question types here enable you to deliver a whole variety of different kind of variations on this question format. So I might just reference a few other examples in the library already. So Melodic comparison is a good example of a multiple choice notation question type. And there are a bunch of these already in the library. And just to give you an idea of what these look like, I'll preview this question here for you. So we're given 4 multiple choice notation excerpts, and we have to determine we can choose an answer and then play it back if need be. So these are really quite quick and easy to create, and also the beauty of it, again, I should mention that once you set this up in the library, my notation here has been set up. I'll just right click on here so you can view the notation. Set my notation up so that I have 4 bits of quite similar melodic material. So when I'm creating these questions, I can create a question where A is the correct answer, B is the correct answer, C and D and so on. And you'll see that's actually what's being created over here. So when I'll just create a quick copy of this question so you can see how it's set up. Let's double click on that. So in here, all that's going on when we have created this question is a multiple choice notation based question. I've defined my answers here and I've selected the notation that I'd like to use for each answer. And then I've created a single question where this is the correct answer. And then I've simply just changed under the playback area the bit of notation that is used for playback for each variation on this question. So if all of a sudden I wanted to replicate this question and create an additional question, again, under create edit choices here, I can say, actually, this time A is going to be the correct answer, and I can disable B as the correct answer. And down here under the playback area, I can simply choose the top notation item for playback and disable the second item. So again, this is an example of where you can manipulate content really easily to create multiple questions to support your curriculum content. Okay, now we're starting to run out of time here. Let's have a quick question, just a quick check to see if any other things have popped up. So what we might really quickly have a look at is, I'll just quickly mention some of the other question types that are available here. And we might, again, under the notation area here, I'll just quickly show you. You can also create highlight question types where you might display some notation and say musician and ask the student to highlight all the A's or all the C sharps in the displayed excerpt. You might ask them to highlight any instances of, say, the interval of a perfect fourth or something like that. It's really can be, this question type can be used to deliver a whole variety of different question types, different kind of content. Also, text question types. So in here, you can basically allow the student to enter free text under or above notation, or you can also use the list feature to deliver a bunch of different things. Let me just show you this really quickly. So say I wanted my student to, and this is probably best demonstrated in Musician actually. I'll click on plus here to create a new question. Give it a dummy question name here. Going for notation and text question type. And I'm going to use this list feature here. So perhaps I want my students to identify, say, note names. And I can include, I think the excerpt I'll choose may have maybe an F major, so I'll pop a B flat in there. And now I can choose an excerpt here, and I think there's one that I had like for us to use. Which looks like this. And so this could be like a note reading type exercise, but using an excerpt. So I'm going to hide these parts because they are not relevant to what I'm trying to deliver here. But then I can basically use the bulk add item up here to add a little box under each notation item, under each note in this case. And then I just have to determine the correct answer here. So this can all be automatically, assessed. So I would go along and finish setting that up. Just going to delete some of these because we won't worry about finishing this question type for now. But I just want to show you how this essentially works. So then in here, the student has to come in and select the correct, select pictures and so on. Yeah. And then they can, again, compare their answer against the correct answer. So this is kind of just one example of how you may choose to use this question type for a note reading exercise. It could be used for intervals between pictures. It could be used for, perhaps identifying form items, motives, motivic variation, a whole range of different kinds of musical elements here. And the palette itself, the entries that are available are completely definable by you. So that's super flexible. All right, now, before we finish up, I do really want to show you just some of the manually assessed question types that you can deliver in the programs. So these can be composition tasks, 4-part writing, species counterpoint, and also free response text type questions. So I might just jump in and again just quickly show you a few examples of how these are created or existing examples in the library. So again, we looked at some of the part writing before. I showed you a super short example, but let me just find another one now that is a little bit longer. So this one will use this entire excerpt here. And again, these sorts of questions look like this. The student can come in, pop in their answer, select their voice 2 to input their other bits and pieces, and so on. And that can be then assigned to a test or worksheet for manual assessment by you as the instructor later. So you can copy those and check out how they are created, but they're quite simple to set up. Now I would like to show you a creative question type. So these can be good for simple composition type tasks. And again, let's just click on plus here. Okay. So we're going to get the student to compose a melody using the display to scale. So my question is going to be notation based, and we're going to select creative here. And we're going to first of all choose the bit of notation that the student is going to interact with. Now in this case, I just like to start with something that's some empty notation. So I'm just going to type in empty here. There's lots of kind of base scores that you can use. And I want something that's just 4 bars long, perhaps in 3/4 in the treble clef. Okay, so my notation will look similar to this. With blanks, I want my student to only be able to add single notes, so they won't be able to enter chords here. And I'm just going to make sure the notation that displays is completely blank here by just disabling a few little options there, the bar and rest. Okay, so I've set up the kind of template for what the student will interact with. If I want to put some limitations or scope around the composition task here, I can control this under the options area. And this can include all sorts of things from my notation modes to whether I want them to also be able to add chord symbols, to if I want to restrict the note values that are available to them under the notation palette. So if I don't want some of these note values to be available to them, I can simply turn them off. I can turn off the voices that are available to them. I can allow phrase marks and slurs and ties, and I can also allow them to enter text as well if I like. Now, if I want, I can also give them more free range control over the composition. So if I want them to be able to change the key, change the time signature, the length of the composition, and a whole range of other things, you can enable or disable them. By default, they are all locked to the notation that we have set up, but you can simply allow any, we can allow the student to kind of, override with specific selections that you set up. Okay, now as I said in my question text here, the other bit of information I need to show to my student is I'm going to give them a scale to base their composition on, and under notation here, I'm going to choose select, and let's choose our, no, what we want is a, let's say we go for a pentatonic scale, and we'll just give them a C major pentatonic scale. I don't need to show them this across all the 4 clefs, so I can simply turn off any that I don't need displayed. I may choose to actually hide the bar lines as well, and perhaps the time signature, and you'll see that this just tidies up the notation a little bit, makes it a bit simpler for your students. All right, so now I can preview my question here. Looks like so. Actually, one other option that I will turn on is display a play answer. So for a composition task, this just allows the student to play back their composition so they can get an idea of what it actually sounds like. So the student can put their answer in, they can play it back. Ask them to add some phrase marks here. You may even choose, ask them to add some lyrics perhaps, and so on. I'm not feeling particularly poetic at this this time of the morning, but they can obviously add beautiful lyrics there. So yeah, so basically you can get students to compose things like this, and then they can then submit them to you for assessment. So that's an example of a really kind of simple composition task. You could also choose to display part of an excerpt, and then perhaps have the student complete the next 2 bars or the next 4 bars. So it's really flexible in the way that you can kind of deliver this type of content. All right. Again, just before we finish up, a couple of really quick question types I'd love to show you. Free text question type. So in here, this can be useful for delivering extended text type answers, questions. So you might ask the student to comment on the use of dynamics, and the student can have multiple line entry for their question type, and they can have a maximum of 200 words. Again, we can choose our notation here. So let's perhaps find some, actually what I would like to do is use some audio here rather than notation. Change that to audio. And let's grab If I want, I can also display any matching notation that we may have for this question, if we choose to. And then the question itself looks like this. And there we have it. So again, those types of questions can be submitted for your students. The manual question type is. There are also lots of questions already in the library, say in Musician, for doing species counterpoint type questions, as we looked at 4-part writing, a whole bunch of other things. Now, just before we finish up, I would love to just really quickly just give you a quick peek at one of the question types that will be available really, really soon in a question, in an update. So again, this update should be out within the next week or so, and it gives you even more control over questions here. So we're going to create a new question, and this time we're going to create a dictation question, and we're going to ask the student to transcribe the bass parts. Whoops. Numerals. Okay, so there's a few new options here that you won't see in your current versions, but what we're going to do is, again, using the notate question type, we're going to turn this this on, figured bass, and I'm just going to set my chord palette to be just the required chords. But you'll notice now when I select my notation, if I just search for SATB in here, I can find lots of things that I can use. Perhaps let's just grab this one. Right, so what you can see here now is that we have a lot more flexibility in the way that we can make parts hidden or editable. And this is really great for creating these types of questions. One other quick little thing that is useful if you have notation set up like this, which has piano style plus all the voices separated onto individual parts, plus chorale style here at the top. There's a little feature up here in this drop-down menu, first part visible, which just turns everything off apart from that part. Okay, so now, as I said, what you can do here is you have control over this per voice now. And so for this question type, I just want to make just the soprano part the focus there. And I will highlight, click on the notation to choose which bits are given and hidden from the student. I'm going to turn off the tenor part, and again, for my bass part, I'm just going to make sure the bottom note's given and the other parts the student will have to enter. Okay, so this question type, and again, I can choose to add a starting pitch and counting if need be. But basically, this question type will look like something like this. And then my bass part. And then for my Roman numerals. So it's really easy to create these types of questions, limit the palette. If I wanted to, I can also restrict the rhythmic values that are available here. It's largely irrelevant since the excerpt only uses half notes there. So again, that's done under the options area. I can control exactly what's available to my students. Just means less distractions for my students there. Now, something else that's really cool that is in this new version that's just about to come is the mixer. So you'll note that currently this is a 2-part dictation question. So what I'm going to do is jump back here, and under the playback area here, under modify selections, again, I can turn on playback for the alto and the tenor parts as well. So now this question will sound like this. Okay, and now the other cool feature that is coming in this next little update is our mixer. So in here, basically, if you choose for students to have access to it, the student can play with the levels of each of the voices in here. So I can reduce the tenor and the alto even more if need be. And increase the soprano and the bass if need be. So you'll note here that students can't turn these voices completely off, or when they reduce the volume, they can't reduce it to 0. So this is a setting that you'll be able to control as well. So for general practice, you'll be able to A, enable or disable a mixer, or B, decide how far the student will be able to adjust the level of individual voices. And similarly on a test or worksheet, you'll be able to control that side of the programs as well. Just so obviously students can't, turn a 4-part playback into essentially a monophonic dictation exercise by doing something like that. So you can control all those kinds of thresholds. But I think that is quite a useful tool. So students, if they're struggling to hear the soprano part or the bass part, or perhaps one of the inner parts for a more advanced question, they can have some kind of control over those kinds of devices. All right, that is about it from me. The new version will have many other kinds of features as well that will hopefully be of use to you. Some of them kind of tucked under the hood, but lots of them within the library area. Really quickly, just for your own workflow, library content, custom library content, does get locked once certain things are attached to that media, or once they're used in a certain way. And this is to protect the integrity of those results and questions. Obviously, if you have a question assigned to a test and then you go and change the question, if there are already student results attached to that question, then it changes the entire potential outcomes of that test and those test results. So things do get locked as part of this process as you work through the library. As I said here, media becomes locked when there are questions attached to it, and questions become locked when there are test results saved against the question. So just wanted to make you aware of that, just so there aren't frustrations with, I've created questions now, but I actually want to edit my original media. We have changed this recently again in the latest update that's coming very soon to provide a few more editing rights for your custom content. But essentially these protections are in place so that questions do not get broken when you change media. So say you added more parts to a piece of media, all of a sudden the original melodic dictation question, the whole context of that changes, and the selections that you may have made for that question are also changed. So yes, these protections are in place. If you have issues, you can copy media items to replicate them and then create new questions based off them. Sometimes that can be a good workflow. But as I said, with the new version that's about to be released, you will have some editing rights over content that isn't going to break other areas of the content that you may have already assigned or manipulated in other ways. All right, so I've chatted about these. Kind of related is some of the new content that we have, new part writing worksheets. We had a look at some of that, as well as new kind of theory and syllabus support for, I guess, more typical, if there is such a thing, theory and oral kind of, 1 through 3 courses or units. And we didn't get to it today, but you can, of course, deliver all this library content through via a syllabus or within your own worksheets and tests as well. So check out our other training videos on any of that content. All right, so for any additional kind of support questions you may have, get in touch via our website, or support@risingsoftware is kind of the best email address to get in touch out. We are currently running a live weekly webinar here, just general support Q&A. Come and have a chat, and any kind of questions that you have, we can address there. I'll pop a link into the chat window in a moment, just so you have that. And I'll also pop some links to just some of these other resources that may be of use to you as you kind of work through the programs. All right. That is all the content we have time for today. I could go on and on about the library because I think it is quite an exciting and interesting part of the program if you are looking to use these nice fixed questions that use pre-composed melodies and draw from repertoire and so on. It gives you a lot of flexibility in that type of content, and really customizing the programs to really suit more specific kind of curriculum needs as you go. As I said, please get in touch if you have any questions along the way. I will leave the Q&A open just for a little bit now. If you have any questions, pop them in there, and I will pop those links into the chat window quickly as well. So let me know if anything kind of crops up from that. Take care. Thank you very much, and stay in touch. See you later.